Ladies and gents, welcome back. Now, Justin Trudeau, no stranger to embarrassing himself when he opens his mouth in front of the Canadian public. But when he speaks about democracy in light of recent events in Canada, the world is listening. Justin Trudeau delivers a bizarre and revealing rant on democracy, with so much of the news cycle being understandably dominated with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It's been easy to miss some of the insanity continuing to come out of Canada. On the ground, the Freedom Convoy is no more, and the use of the Emergencies Act was finally revoked by Justin Trudeau. The Canadian Prime Minister only did so after facing intense scrutiny for seeking its renewal despite the protests being over. But even though things have calmed down, Trudeau has continues to push for his dystopian dream. In a recent speech, he gave a bizarre and revealing rant on democracy, quote unquote, in which he suggested that it's anti-democratic for a government not to censor free speech.
And we've come to a moment that, quite frankly, we've seen coming over the past years. And we've talked about it in the news, not just about Ukraine, but about democracies around the world, that we see a bit of a slippage in our democracies. Countries turning towards slightly more authoritarian leaders. Countries allowing increasing misinformation and disinformation to be shared on social media, turning people against the values and the principles of democracies that are so strong. And that slippage over the years, unfortunately, emboldened Putin and made him think that he could get away with this, that he could get away with it in Ukraine.
The majority of that speech, you would think that he was talking in the third person. No, he was actually talking about Vladimir Putin, the leader of Russia, saying that they allowed disinformation from reaching the airwaves in Russia. So there's a lot to unpack there. Really a lot to unpack. It's amazing to hear what comes out of this guy's mouth. Now, that being said, in Canada, the committee to reviewing Trudeau's use of the Emergencies Act faces a daunting task. Now, this is CBC reporting on this, so take this with a extreme pinch, no Salt Bay here, extreme pinch of salt in this. The task of reviewing the Liberal government's historic use of the Emergencies Act and in response to anti-vaccine mandate protests in Ottawa, peaceful protests in Ottawa. There's always a spin to it. Anti-mandate protests in Ottawa at border crossings got off to an inauspicious start this week. But it's also too early to abandon all hope that parliamentarians will be able to meet the occasion with the seriousness and transparency that the moment demands. I think given what has been endured across the country over the last 2 months and what's at stake in order for us to move forward, I can't think of a more important moment through this entire pandemic than to have all the parties of the House and Senate set aside hyper-partisanship and really allow for the seriousness of our work, says NDP Matthew Green, who will co-chair the committee. It's so funny how hyper-partisanship being something that the NDP is concerned about in this case. Scrolling down to the bottom of the article here, what did the protests meet the emergency standard is the real question. So TLDR for this whole article is that, and that's the too long didn't read for the article, is spin, essentially. So it's CBC spin. You got to really, really go down to the bottoms of articles if you want to get any information of what is actually going on. So the idea of the committee meeting for this is an inquiry into the Emergencies Act and whether it actually did meet the emergency that the Trudeau cabinet, the Trudeau caucus and government insists was the case. Officially, the Emergencies Act assumed that the committee will review the exercise of power and the performance of duties and functions pursuant to a declaration of emergency in practice. That likely means addressing two fundamental questions. Was the threshold met for declaring a public emergency, and were the powers invoked necessary to deal with the situation? But the lines of inquiry could extend beyond that point, up to including how protesters are allowed to occupy downtown Ottawa in the first place. Green said said he's interested in looking into the into the actions of police, or the lack thereof them, role played by the dark money, in quotes, raised through fundraising websites and the influence of social media. Now, we've seen all kinds of unhinged in recent times of members of parliament, but rhetoric like dark money or that of this parliamentarian in recent times.
How much vitriol do we have to see of honk honk, which is an acronym for Hail Hitler? Do we
You can't make this up, folks. So at the end of the story, this article is basically just affirming that what is going on is that the inquiry is going forward. Now, I'm going to be reporting on this inquiry as it moves forward and as news hits what decisions are being made or how it's moving forward. I think the most important thing now for people is to be vigilant and watch what it is that our government is doing when it comes to the oversight of how the Emergencies Act was invoked and brought into law in Canada. Now, transparency being the most important thing. And in recent times, well, as people have been paying attention to what happens in government and how government actually functions, people are, just blown away at how comical and clownish the institutions that our trusted institutions have become over the years. So I'll keep you posted on all of this and keep paying attention. And as always, keep on trucking.